Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Ex-cons of Reddit. What's the craziest things you've seen inside of prison, not safe for work? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I was 20 years old, I thought I wanted to be a correctional officer. One night, I was sent to work at the medical ward, where each inmate had their own isolated cell where they were let out twice a day. That night, I was going around with the nurse, giving the inmates their medicine, and we came to one inmate's cell, and as soon as we opened the door, I was knocked back by the most putrid smell I've ever smelled in my life. I've been to the dump plenty of times in my life, and it was nothing in comparison to the smell this inmate had going on. Once we were done giving out the medicine, I went up to the officer training me and asked what was going on with that inmate and why he smelled so god-awful. He said, "Oh, you met Grady? He shits and pisses himself on purpose. He never changes or showers, so he constantly lives in his own filth. I found out that he was raped once in prison, so he started shitting and pissing himself so he wouldn't be raped anymore." My brother said a guy across from him had a new cellmate who had gastrointestinal problems and wouldn't stop farting these rancid, horrible farts after the guy told him repeatedly to stop, not like he could help it, so the guy beat the farter to death in their cell with his bare hands. My brother said he had never seen so much blood from one person before. Not me, but I spoke to a former inmate after his release who had developed severe PTSD from some of the things he witnessed while incarcerated. One of the stories was that he was playing cards with some guys and one of them was smoking a cigarette. Another inmate who was not playing with them approached the table and asked the guy smoking if he could get shorts on the cigarette. Shorts means before you finished smoking, you gave the cigarette to someone else so they got the last few puffs of the cigarette before putting it out. The smoker agreed. The inmate wandered off and they went back to playing cards. Well, the guy playing cards must have forgot and finished the cigarette. A little while later, the other inmate came back to the table asking for the short, and the guy at the table told him he had forgotten about it and finished the cigarette. Guy wanders off again, and they go back to playing cards. Shortly afterwards, the inmate who wanted shorts comes back to the table, comes up behind the player, pulls his head back, and started shanking him in the eye and throat with a pen or pencil. Dude died over forgetting to give someone a damn cigarette butt. That someone could have such little value for life over something so trivial is truly frightening. So, just nothing to say. A lot of these stories are going to be pretty bad. I did a 4-month stint in Kajang, Malaysia. This Nigerian dude used to pilfer from other cells. This Malay gang found him and dipped his hand in boiling oil, basically deep fried it while it was still attached to him. That scream, it still curdles my blood. Poor guy was reduced to an unconscious pool of blood, sweat, tears, vomit, shit, and piss. He lost more than his hand on that day. I was in a South American prison. There was a lot of drug addicts. They usually sold their food in order to buy more drugs, so they were always hungry. One day I was eating my lunch, rice, and a leg of chicken and some beans. When I finished my meal, there were some chicken bones left on my plate, and a drug addict approached me to ask if I could gift him the chicken bones. So I lent him my bones, and he started eating them. It was heartbreaking. The violence was nothing compared to the people. The guy who taught me Scrabble beats his wife to death with a frying pan when she discovered his gambling debts. The guy who taught me poker tied up his employer in his house, and when the boss refused to give him the combo to a safe, the guy just burned the house down with the boss tied inside. I worked out with a guy who was caught with 2 arms and 1 leg in his trunk. He was in an Asian gang, had just performed a hit, and was bringing the evidence back to his people for proof when he was pulled over. His co-defendant was snitching, so he spent literally all of his time working out to kill the guy the second he got the chance. Before I got shipped to prison, these were all county jail, he finally got his shot and essentially ripped the guy's face off in the middle of a hallway in front of guards. It was a huge F-up on the cop's part, to the point where it was rumored it was the gang that paid to make sure the snitch died. You live with these people, play cards, gamble, watch sports. If you're locked in your cell for a big game, you listen on your radios together and talk shit through the hatches in your doors. On Wednesdays, your chicken quarter is going to go towards a huge homemade meal for whoever wanted to chip in, and it's going to be made by the 22-year-old Crip who's been charged with 9 separate murders and is seemingly the nicest person you'll ever meet. It's effing wild. Nothing makes sense and everything's dangerous. You're in this together, but at the same time, everyone has all sorts of rage just ready to blow. I had an ag assault with a deadly weapon, as well as a separate case of unlawful possession of a firearm. So I had the pleasure of going to max units. Interestingly enough, the threat of constant danger actually helped things stay calm the vast majority of the time. Everyone's a killer. No one wants to be killed type vibes. I got stabbed with a Dixon pencil, but that was from Richard Bursby, Mr. Tie My Boss Up and Burn Him Alive. It was over a gambling debt he owed me. He's old and weak. I ultimately took twice what he owed me, and we were back at the table playing poker together that same day. Google his name if you'd like. I believe he just had an appeal denied or some shit. NJDOC. Either you become one of them, or you live underneath them. And once you're one of them, they're surprisingly and frighteningly good-natured and decent to kill a few years' time with. A guy got stomped to death my first day in. The two guys fighting were rival gang members. The guards didn't do anything until the guy getting stomped stopped breathing. Then they came in and took them both away, one in a bag and one in cuffs. Brixton, A-Wing. Coming back from canteen, this scary-looking wild-eyed dude steps across and tells me to hand over my burn tobacco. I laugh and say no and walk by, waiting for him to do something. Nothing happened. A few minutes later, same guy opened some poor lad's stomach with one slash, and he was lying there trying to hold his intestines in. I saw the fear and panic on his face. The scary guy just casually walked away. No idea what happened to either of them. Alarms went off, everyone back to their cells and locked up again. Dude in the cell next to mine tried to kill himself with a sharpened pencil. He just kept stabbing himself in the chest but couldn't get deep enough. He was hauled off by COs kicking and screaming, begging for death. He was going to be deported. I was never in prison, but in jail a bit for drug charges. I was in my 30s, but my bunkie was a really nice 19-year-old kid in there for selling drugs. He seemed a bit over his head, but introduced me to the jits. I didn't know anyone, and we'd play cards and shit. He had a real high bond, and one day they said to get his shit he got bail. He didn't know who, but I was so happy for him. The next morning the CO told me he was shot and killed that night. Being very respectful, everyone liked the guy. It was confined on the evening news. Really effed me up, and I can guess who got him bailed. Just the way that some people talk about murder. Some of the people in there would be telling a story, casually drop the fact that they killed someone, then keep going on with the story like nothing happened. You know, just having a normal conversation, like how's the wife, how's the kids, how's your mother, I ate a guy, you know, normal stuff. Boiling hot peanut butter dumped on a sleeping child molester's face. The screaming and thrashing was pretty intense. The idea is that you can't wipe it off on something to mitigate the damage caused. It's going to burn deeply, and in my opinion, that was the worst that watching a guy on the bench press take a 35K plate smash to the skull repeatedly. He was dead pretty quickly. The peanut butter burn is a permanent disfigurement that will have months of pain and suffering. I don't know if this counts, but my dad was in prison with Richard Speck, who is, if you don't know, an American mass murderer who brutally murdered and raped 8 nurses. My dad told me during his time in prison, Speck bragged about what he did all the time and said prison was a wonderful vacation for him, and he would do it all again if he had the chance. He would even go as far as saying how much he loved to kill those women. So sickening. Speck also made porn in prison, which I'm sure is on the internet somewhere. I saw someone take a hot pot, fill it up with baby oil, add a pound of sugar and some magic shave, bring it to a boil, then splash it in a person's face. It literally melted the guy's face off. This happened around 1999, and I still have the occasional nightmare about it. Honestly, most of it is the same type shit you run into in real life. Gangbangers, thieves, drug dealers, guys with anger management issues, etc. But the real problem is when you affiliate. That's what is going to keep you in prison doing worse. So I was in Limon CO, closed custody, so 1 level below max. Mostly chill people, but a lot of activity. The worst thing was they brought in a bus from Buena Vista. There was one kid, 23, nice kid, just got into Rex because he was short-tempered, so they bumped him up to close. He had 8 months left before he killed his number. He's been in the pod 3 days when an older Pisa sees him and says he snitched on him when they were in Adams County. So Pisa grabs 4 others and they jump the kid in his cell. They beat the dog shit out of him, and at the end they drug him out of his cell, propped his neck on the railing, and one big ass dude just smashed his neck with a kick and snapped it. Fight for life comes, but it's not going to help. All the guys catch a murder charge, but the effed up part is the older Pisa yells, "F you, Comenes!" When his neck snapped. Kid's name wasn't Comenes, it was Garcia. The Pisa had mistaken the kid for someone else. 8 months left. Kid was arrested at 17, 23 years old when he died. Never even saw the outside of a facility as an adult, and killed in a case of mistaken identity. Prison could pop off like that. CO here. Had a guy stick a full-size number 2 pencil in his leg, the long way, insert it into his thigh, and shove it under the skin until you couldn't see it anymore. Took him to the hospital to have it removed. Days later, he did the same thing, in the same hole, with a rubberized pencil. Rinse and repeat. Hospital removes the pencil again. Couple days later, while on active suicide watch, he managed to jam part of a styrofoam cup, playing cards, and caulking from a cell window into his leg pocket. Took him to the OR. Doctors pulled out another inch of wood pencil, pencil lead, and fragments of God knows what of where. I don't even think he knew what all was in there. Not a crazy story, but was in for a few days and didn't realize they put you in cells based on the color of your skin. I'm a white dude with a Hispanic last name, and they put me in a cell with a straight Nazi who told me if I went to actual prison, I was only in for a weekend, that I would be a misfit because I wasn't one thing or the other. He openly called the black dudes next to our cells horrible things. I'm not a con, but my dad told me when he was upstream, guards informed them that they had a high-case child rapist coming in. When the guy got there, he ended up being this old white man walking with a cane. He didn't last very long in the courtyard. They killed him in the prison yard. I was sitting in the TV room in the feds. The inmate phones in this particular institution are situated in little phone booths. No idea why, but on the move, a guy ran up in the housing unit and stabbed the guy 15 or so times in the booth, 3 in the face. Dude couldn't go anywhere, slumped immediately. Second, 2 guys in the kitchen made a bet that one of them wouldn't go through the commercial dishwasher. Guy took the bet and went through. Came out on the other side as one human-sized blister. 100% of his skin was blistered full of juice. He was airlifted out in a bubble-wrapped suit to hospital. I was fresh in at the time and working in the kitchen when this happened, but I wasn't in the dish room. The blood-curdling screaming as the dishwasher cycled on still gives me goosebumps 10 years later, and I can't unsee what a human covered in blisters looks like. I don't know if he survived, as they don't give updates to inmates. I do know the guy who bet him was charged with fresh street charges, and there are plenty more. Well, that is one hell of a bet. I hope he got something good for winning, besides possibly dying. Not prison, but courthouse holding cells. Was in for a drunken fight myself, as was pretty much all of the 8 guys I was sharing that cell with. All of us were worn out, hungover, or shaking for a fix, except this one guy who was acting happy because he was up first and his words, going to be the first to get a smoke, which he was happy about. Being locked up in those cells, it's not rare for people to chat a bit since we had all been in solitary police station holding cells before. Usually, "What are you in for?" type small talk. Well, this happy guy didn't know what he had done, but he knew he couldn't remember the last couple of days, so assumed it was drunken behavior of some sort. He was the first to see his lawyer and came back white as a sheet, not talking and just staring at the wall until one of the guys got him to talk. Turned out, he got blind drunk with added Valium found on him, got in a fight and lost, gone home and come back with a kitchen knife and a kettle full of sugar water, stabbed a random guy and threw the kettle into the bar, scolding multiple people. Plus, the guy he stabbed was in hospital in critical condition, and he was up on multiple counts of assault with intent to injure, serious bodily harm, possession of a deadly weapon, possession of a controlled substance, and attempted murder. He was not going to be the first out for a smoke, and was looking at a long prison sentence. Went from cock of the walk to hollow, all in about 20 minutes. I'd seen a lot of shit, but I've never seen someone get the look of having lost their entire life like that.